I stood in the frozen food aisle, holding a pint of butter pecan ice cream, my late husband's favorite, when my phone buzzed with a message from my daughter. "Don't come home yet. Running some errands at the house." I thought nothing of it. She had a key. She was my daughter. I trusted her with everything. I'd just signed over $33 million and the deed to my home because she promised to take care of me. But when I pulled into my driveway 40 minutes later, there was a locksmith's van parked where I usually left my car. I watched through the windshield as my daughter handed the man cash. Then she turned and saw me. The look on her face wasn't surprise. It wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. Like I'd interrupted something important. She walked over, opened my car door, and said 5 words that shattered my world. "You need to find somewhere else to stay." In my own driveway. In front of the house where I'd raised her. How did I let this happen? And how did I find the strength to fight back when I'd lost everything? If this story touches your heart, please subscribe and stay with me to hear how this ends. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. You might see your own family in this story. My name is Margaret Ann Sullivan, and I'm 68 years old. 6 months ago, if you'd asked me about my life, I would have told you I was blessed. I lived in a comfortable 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood where I'd spent the last 42 years. The house held every memory that mattered. My wedding day when Robert carried me over the threshold. The pencil marks on the kitchen door frame tracking Victoria's height from age 3 to 18. The garden where I'd planted roses the year my granddaughter Emma was born. I could still see Robert in every corner of that house. The reading chair where he'd fall asleep with the newspaper. The kitchen table where we'd have coffee every morning. The bedroom where I'd held his hand during his final days 6 years ago. After Robert passed, I thought my heart would never feel whole again. We'd been married for 40 years. He was my high school sweetheart, my best friend, my everything. But I found purpose in the small things. I volunteered at the library twice a week. I had coffee with my neighbor Helen every Tuesday morning. I tended my garden. And I waited for Victoria's visits and phone calls. She was my only child. And after losing Robert, she and her family became my entire world. Victoria had always been ambitious. Even as a little girl, she wanted the best of everything. Designer clothes, the newest toys, the most expensive birthday parties. Robert and I were comfortable. He'd been a successful accountant and made smart investments, but we lived modestly. We believed in saving, in being practical, in not flaunting wealth. Victoria never quite understood that. She married Marcus Ashford when she was 26, a man from a wealthy family who worked in investment banking. They had 2 beautiful children, Emma and Joshua, and lived in a gated community with houses that looked like something from a magazine. I loved my grandchildren desperately. Emma was 16, thoughtful and quiet, always sketching in her notebook when she visited. Joshua was 14, loud and energetic, the kind of boy who couldn't sit still. I cherished every moment with them, though those moments had become increasingly rare over the past few years. Victoria was always so busy with her social obligations, her charity galas, her tennis club. I understood. I knew she had her own life. The money talk started about a year ago. Victoria came over for lunch one afternoon, which surprised me because she usually just called. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework when she was 7, and asked me about my finances. "Mom, have you thought about estate planning?" she asked, her voice dripping with concern. "You're not getting any younger. What if something happens? We need to make sure everything is organized." I told her I had a will. Everything would go to her when I passed. Robert's life insurance policy and our investments had left me comfortable. Very comfortable. I didn't need much, so the money just sat there accumulating interest. Victoria nodded, but I could see something calculating in her expression. "Mom, have you ever thought about transferring assets now? For tax purposes? You could save so much money if you did it while you're still alive. And Marcus and I, we could help you manage everything. Make sure you're taken care of. I didn't understand all the financial details, she explained. Numbers had always been Robert's domain. But Victoria made it sound sensible. She talked about tax benefits and estate planning and how this would protect me. She promised that nothing would change except paperwork. I'd still live in my house. I'd still have access to everything I needed. She'd just be the legal owner, managing things for my benefit. She even said she'd pay all my bills so I wouldn't have to worry about anything. You can finally relax, Mom. Let me handle the stress. You've earned your rest. Over the next few months, Victoria visited more often. She brought lawyers to the house. She had me sign papers. So many papers. She explained each one quickly, pointing to signature lines while talking about legal jargon I didn't fully grasp. Trust transfers, property deeds, power of attorney, financial management agreements. It's all standard, Mom. Everyone does this. It protects you. I trusted her. She was my daughter. I'd given birth to her, raised her, sacrificed for her. Why would she lie to me? The last document I signed was on a Tuesday morning in late March. Victoria brought her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman named Ms. Peterson, who barely looked at me. They spread papers across my dining room table. Victoria had brought coffee from that expensive cafe she liked, the one where a single cup cost more than I'd spend on groceries for a day. This is it, Mom. Once you sign these, everything's protected. You never have to worry about finances again. The papers said I was transferring ownership of my house and the entirety of my investment accounts to Victoria. The total value was just over $33 million. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the signature line. Victoria, honey, this says you'll own everything. What if... She cut me off with a laugh, the kind of laugh that made me feel foolish for questioning. Mom, we've been through this a dozen times. You'll have full access to everything. I'm just managing it legally. This protects you from taxes, from nursing home costs if you ever need care, from anyone trying to take advantage of you. I'm your daughter. I would never hurt you. You trust me, don't you? I looked into her eyes, searching for the little girl who used to climb into my lap and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. I wanted to see that love. I wanted to believe she was protecting me. So I signed. My hand shook as I wrote my name, Margaret Ann Sullivan. Victoria smiled, collected the papers quickly, and left within 15 minutes. I'll be in touch soon, Mom. We'll celebrate properly once everything's finalized. That was 3 weeks before the grocery store day. 3 weeks before my entire life collapsed. The first sign that something was wrong came 5 days after I signed the final papers. I went to the bank to withdraw money for Helen's birthday gift. I wanted to buy her that gardening book she'd mentioned. My card was declined. I tried again, thinking it was a machine error. Declined again. The teller, a young woman named Jessica, who'd helped me for years, looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Sullivan, it appears this account has been closed. You'll need to contact the account holder. I felt a flutter of panic in my chest. I am the account holder, I told her. She looked at her screen, then at me with genuine sympathy. According to our records, the account was transferred to Victoria Sullivan Ashford and closed last week. She withdrew the full balance. I drove home in a daze, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. There had to be a mistake. Victoria had promised nothing would change. She'd said I'd have access to everything. I called her immediately when I got home. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and I could hear laughter in the background. Mom, I'm at lunch with friends. What do you need? Her tone was clipped, impatient. Victoria, I went to the bank. They said my account is closed. I can't access my money. There was a pause. Mom, we talked about this. I'm managing your finances now. Just text me when you need something, and I'll transfer money to you. It's simpler this way. My heart sank. But you said I'd have access. You said nothing would change. She sighed, and I could picture her rolling her eyes the way she used to when she was a teenager. Mom, you have access. Through me. This is what we agreed to. Look, I have to go. My salmon is getting cold. Just send me a list of what you need this month, and I'll take care of it. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat at my kitchen table for an hour, staring at nothing. How much did I need? I'd never had to ask permission to access my own money before. Robert and I had lived modestly, but we'd never had to ask anyone for anything. The house was paid off. I had simple needs. But the thought of texting my daughter every time I needed groceries, or wanted to buy a birthday gift, or had to replace my worn-out shoes, it made me feel small, childlike, dependent. I texted her that evening. I need about $2,000 for monthly expenses. Groceries, utilities, gas, small personal items, she responded 3 hours later. $2,000? Mom, that's excessive. I'll send you $800. That should be more than enough if you're careful. $800. For everything, for the entire month. I'd given her $33 million, and she thought $800 was generous. But I told myself it was fine. It was just a misunderstanding. We'd work it out. Victoria was busy. She didn't understand what things cost because she'd never had to budget. I'd talk to her in person, explain it calmly, and we'd figure out a better system. I pushed down the growing dread in my stomach and tried to focus on the positive. At least I still had my home. At least I had that. Helen noticed something was wrong immediately. She'd known me for 15 years, ever since she moved in next door. We'd shared countless cups of coffee, gardened together, watched each other's houses during vacations. She came over on Tuesday morning as usual, carrying her thermos and a bag of muffins from the bakery. She took one look at my face and set everything down. Margaret, what happened? I told her everything, about the papers I'd signed, about the bank account, about Victoria's dismissive response. Helen's expression grew darker with every word. When I finished, she reached across the table and gripped my hand. Margaret, listen to me. I'm a retired nurse, not a lawyer, but what you're describing sounds like financial exploitation. Your daughter has isolated you from your own assets. This isn't normal estate planning. I shook my head. No, Helen, it's just a misunderstanding. Victoria wouldn't. She's my daughter. She loves me. Helen's eyes were sad. I hope you're right, but please be careful. Document everything. Every conversation, every text message, just in case. I promised I would, but I didn't believe I'd need to. This was Victoria, my baby girl. The child I'd rocked to sleep every night, the teenager I'd driven to school activities, the young woman I'd helped plan her wedding. She wouldn't hurt me. She couldn't. That's when everything changed for me. That's when I learned exactly how wrong I could be. It was a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks after the bank incident. I needed groceries, not just food, but toiletries and cleaning supplies. The $800 Victoria had sent was already running low. I'd been careful, buying generic brands, skipping things I wanted to make the money stretch. But I still needed more. I texted Victoria, I need another $400 for essentials. The $800 didn't cover everything. She didn't respond for 6 hours. When she finally replied, the message was curt. Mom, you need to learn to budget better. I'm not made of money. I'll send $200, but that's all you're getting this month. Figure it out. I stared at my phone in disbelief. I'm not made of money. She'd just taken $33 million that had been mine, and she was telling me she wasn't made of money. I called her. The phone went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent another text. Victoria, please call me. We need to talk about this. No response. I decided to drive to her house. Maybe if we spoke face to face, without the coldness of text messages, she'd understand how frightening this situation was becoming. I pulled up to her gated community and gave my name at the security gate. The guard, someone I'd never seen before, checked his computer. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the approved visitor list. My stomach dropped. But I'm her mother, Margaret Sullivan. I've visited dozens of times. He looked genuinely sympathetic. I understand, ma'am, but Mrs. Ashford updated her list last week. You're not on it. I can't let you in without her approval. I sat in my car outside the gate for 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My own daughter had removed me from her approved visitor list. She'd literally locked me out of her life. I called her again. This time she answered. "Mom, why is the gate guard calling me? I'm in a meeting." Her voice was annoyed, like I was an inconvenience. "Victoria, I came to talk to you." "I'm at your gate. Can you please tell them to let me in?" There was a long pause. "Mom, I'm busy. You can't just show up unannounced. I have a life. I have obligations. We'll talk later." The line went dead. I drove home in tears. The little girl I'd raised, the one I'd sacrificed so much for, had just told me I couldn't visit her without an appointment. When I got home, I went straight to bed, even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The next incident happened 2 days later. I was in my garden, pulling weeds from the rose beds, when a car pulled into my driveway. A woman in a business suit got out, carrying a clipboard. "Mrs. Sullivan?" she called out. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. "Yes?" She walked over with a professional smile. "I'm Diane Mitchell from Prestige Property Management. I'm here to conduct an initial assessment of the property." I felt confused. "Assessment? I don't understand." She consulted her clipboard. "The property owner, Victoria Sullivan Ashford, has contracted our company to manage this property. We'll be conducting quarterly inspections, handling maintenance, and ensuring the property is being properly maintained." The words hit me like a slap. "This is my home," I said quietly. She looked uncomfortable. "Yes, ma'am, I understand you're residing here. But according to our contract, Mrs. Ashford is the legal owner. She wants to ensure the property value is protected. Now, may I come inside to inspect the interior?" I wanted to refuse. I wanted to tell her to leave. But legally, she was right. This wasn't my home anymore. I'd signed it away. I let her in and watched as she walked through every room, taking photos, making notes. She opened my closets. She inspected under sinks. She ran her hand along windowsills, checking for dust. I felt violated, exposed, judged in my own space. When she finally left, I called Victoria immediately. "For once," she answered. "I know why you're calling, Mom. The property manager told me you seemed upset." My voice came out shaking. "Victoria, you sent someone to inspect my home without telling me. People I don't know going through my belongings. How could you do this without even warning me?" She sighed dramatically. "Mom, it's not your home anymore. It's my property. I need to protect my investment. That house is worth over $3 million. I can't let it fall into disrepair because you're getting older and can't maintain it properly." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I've maintained this house perfectly for 42 years. The garden is beautiful. Everything is clean. There's nothing in disrepair." Victoria's voice turned cold. "Mom, you're almost 70. Your vision isn't what it used to be. You move slowly. You forget things. I'm being responsible. Someone needs to make sure that property is protected, and clearly it needs to be me. Now I have to go. Emma has tennis." She hung up before I could respond. I sank onto my couch and cried. For the first time, a terrible thought entered my mind. Helen was right. This wasn't just poor communication or a misunderstanding. This was something darker. Victoria wasn't protecting me. She was controlling me, erasing me, taking everything I had and making me feel like I should be grateful for whatever scraps she chose to give me. If this story breaks your heart like it does mine, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments if you've ever felt betrayed by family. The incidents came faster after that, each one more devastating than the last. 1 week later, I went to my doctor's appointment, a routine checkup I'd had scheduled for months. When I checked in, the receptionist looked confused. "Mrs. Sullivan, your insurance has been canceled. Do you have another card?" I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I've had the same insurance for 15 years. She checked her computer again. "According to our records, the policy was terminated last week. You'll need to pay out of pocket today, $385 for the visit and labs, or reschedule once you have active coverage." I didn't have $385. Victoria's tight allowance meant I barely had enough for groceries. I left without seeing the doctor, humiliated. In the parking lot, I called Victoria. It went to voicemail. I texted, "My insurance was canceled. Why didn't you tell me?" 3 hours later, she responded, "Managing all these policies is expensive. I'm restructuring everything. You're going on a cheaper plan. It'll be active next month." I wrote back, "I had a doctor's appointment today. I couldn't see the doctor." Her response came quickly. "Mom, you go to the doctor too much anyway. You're healthy. You don't need constant appointments. Learn to handle minor things yourself." My hands shook as I read her words. I went to the doctor twice a year for routine checkups and occasionally when I was sick. That was too much? I thought about my blood pressure medication, the prescription I'd been on for 10 years. I had enough pills for 2 more weeks. What would happen when I ran out? 2 days later, Emma called me. My granddaughter. I was so happy to hear from her that I almost started crying just hearing her voice. "Grandma," she said quietly, and I could tell she was somewhere private. "I need to talk to you about something." My heart lifted. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything. Do you want to come visit? I could make your favorite cookies." There was a long pause. "Grandma, Mom said I'm not allowed to visit you anymore. She said you're going through some confusion, and it's better if we keep our distance for a while." The room spun. "Emma, that's not true. I'm not confused. I'm fine. Your mother and I are having some disagreements, but that has nothing to do with you. Please, can you come see me?" "I miss you so much," Emma's voice cracked. "I miss you too, Grandma. But Mom said if I contact you, she'll take away my car and my phone. She said you might try to manipulate me against her." "But Grandma, I don't believe that." "I know you. Something's wrong. I can feel it. She's different lately. Cold. She keeps talking about remodeling the house, about buying a place in Aspen, about all these expensive things. And she told Dad that you signed everything over, and he looked worried. I heard him arguing with her, telling her this wasn't right, but she shut him down. Tears streamed down my face. "Emma, I love you. Please remember that, no matter what your mother says. And if you ever need me, find a way to reach me. I'll always be here for you." We talked for 5 more minutes before she had to go, terrified her mother would discover the call. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for hours. Victoria was isolating me from my grandchildren. She was rewriting the narrative, making me the problem, painting herself as the responsible daughter protecting her children from a confused elderly woman. The cruelty escalated. The following week, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was from a waste management company, informing me that trash collection service had been canceled. I called Victoria. "Did you cancel my trash service?" She responded with an irritated text. "Mom, you generate barely any trash. You're one person. Take your garbage to the dump yourself. Why should I pay $60 a month for something you don't need?" I was 68 years old. She expected me to load garbage into my car and drive to the dump myself to save $60 while she controlled $33 million. I started keeping a journal like Helen suggested, writing down every incident, every denial, every cruel comment. The list grew daily. Victoria changed my internet and cable without telling me, downgrading to the cheapest service that barely worked. She canceled the lawn service, saying I should mow my own grass. When I told her I was struggling to push the heavy mower, she suggested I hire a neighborhood teenager and pay from my monthly allowance. She stopped by unannounced one afternoon with a real estate agent, discussing the property's potential value and possible renovations, talking about me like I wasn't standing right there. "The current occupant has outdated taste," Victoria told the agent. "Once we're ready, we'll need to completely modernize." Current occupant. That's what I'd become in my own home. An inconvenience. An obstacle to her plans. I wanted to scream that this was my house, my life, my marriage memories living in these walls. But it wasn't my house anymore. I'd signed it away. The grocery store day came 4 weeks after I'd signed the final papers. 4 weeks of escalating cruelty, isolation, and systematic dismantling of my life. I needed food. I'd texted Victoria 3 times asking for money for groceries. She'd sent $100 with a message. This is all you're getting. Stop asking for more. Learn to shop sales. $100 for 2 weeks of food. I went to the grocery store that afternoon, carefully calculating every item. Generic pasta, canned vegetables, marked down bread. I allowed myself one small indulgence, a pint of butter pecan ice cream, Robert's favorite. I stood in the frozen aisle holding it, remembering how he'd eat it straight from the container while we watched old movies. I put it in my cart, $2.49 for a memory. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Don't come home yet. Running some errands at the house. I thought nothing of it. She had a key. Maybe she was dropping something off or picking something up. I finished shopping, checked out, loaded the bags into my car. I drove home on autopilot, thinking about what I'd make for dinner. When I pulled into my driveway, there was a van I didn't recognize parked where I usually left my car. A locksmith's van. My chest tightened. I sat in my car watching as a man installed new locks on my front door. Then I saw Victoria standing on the porch handing him cash. She looked satisfied, checking the new locks, testing the keys. Then she turned and saw me sitting in my car. The expression on her face wasn't surprise. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even anger. It was annoyance. Pure, cold annoyance, like I'd interrupted something important. She walked toward my car and I felt frozen. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. She opened my door, and I saw that she was holding a large black garbage bag. She dropped it on the ground next to my car. You need to find somewhere else to stay, she said. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Victoria, I finally managed. What are you doing? She crossed her arms. I'm taking possession of my property. You've been difficult, Mom. Constantly asking for money, complaining, making demands. I've given you chance after chance to be grateful, to cooperate, to make this easy. But you keep pushing, so I'm done. The house is mine. The money is mine. You signed everything over. You have no legal right to be here anymore. I felt like I was drowning. But you promised. You said I'd always have a home here. You said you were protecting me. Victoria actually laughed. Mom, did you really think I'd let you live here forever? This house is worth over $3 million. I have plans for this property. And that money, I've already started investing it in things that actually matter. The kids' college funds, a vacation home, renovations, a new car for Marcus. You were just letting it sit in accounts earning minimal interest. What a waste. I looked at the garbage bag on the ground. What's in there? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Some of your clothes and toiletries. I'll pack up the rest of your things and put them in storage. You can arrange to get them later. She checked her watch. I need to go. I have a showing with an interior designer in an hour. We're planning the remodel. She started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Mom, don't try to contest this. Everything's legal. You signed over power of attorney. You gave me full control. Any lawyer will tell you there's nothing you can do. You made your choice. She got in her car and drove away, leaving me sitting in my driveway, staring at a garbage bag containing my life. The locksmith avoided eye contact as he packed up his tools. Ma'am, he said quietly, I'm sorry. I didn't know the situation. If I'd known... He trailed off, got in his van, and left. I sat there for 10 minutes, unable to move. Then I picked up the garbage bag and put it in my trunk. I got back in my car. I had nowhere to go. I had no money. I had nothing. I drove to Helen's house. When she opened the door and saw my face, she pulled me inside without a word. I collapsed on her couch and told her everything, the words pouring out between sobs. Helen held my hand and listened. When I finished, her face was set in grim determination. Margaret, this is elder abuse. Financial exploitation and neglect. We're going to fix this. But first, you're staying here. My guest room is yours for as long as you need. That night, Lying in Helen's guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there. The betrayal cut deep, but underneath it all, something else was growing. Anger. For the first time in my life, I was angry at my daughter. Not disappointed, not hurt, furious. She'd calculated this. She'd planned it. She'd manipulated me, stolen from me, and thrown me away like garbage. And she thought she'd gotten away with it. But she'd made mistakes. I'd kept every text message. I'd documented every denial. Helen had witnessed several incidents. Emma had reached out to me. And Victoria, in her arrogance, had assumed I'd just accept this. That I'd disappear quietly. That I'd be too old, too confused, too weak to fight back. She'd underestimated me. She'd forgotten that I'd raised her. I knew her better than anyone. And I knew her weaknesses. The next morning, Helen and I made a list. We needed a lawyer specializing in elder abuse. We needed to gather all documentation. We needed to build a case. Helen made coffee while I sat at her kitchen table with my journal, my phone, and a determination I'd never felt before. I was 68 years old. I'd just lost everything, but I wasn't done yet. Not even close. That's when I finally found my voice. That's when I decided to fight back. And that's when Victoria's perfect plan started to unravel in ways she never saw coming. Helen helped me find attorney David Chen, through her former nursing colleague whose mother had been financially exploited by a caregiver. David specialized in elder law and financial abuse cases. He agreed to meet us that afternoon. I walked into his office carrying a folder containing every piece of documentation I had, the texts from Victoria, my journal entries, bank statements showing the account closures, the property management inspection notice, everything. David was in his mid-50s, professional but warm, with kind eyes that reminded me of Robert. He listened as I told my story from beginning to end, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Mrs. Sullivan, what your daughter has done is textbook elder financial abuse. You signed documents under false pretenses, with promises that were immediately broken. She's isolated you from assets, family members, and basic necessities. She's exerted undue influence and exploited your trust. This is serious, and it's prosecutable." My hands trembled. "But she said everything was legal. She said I signed power of attorney." David nodded. "You did sign documents, but the context matters. If she made false promises to induce you to sign, that's fraud. If she's using those documents in ways that harm you rather than protect you, which is supposed to be the purpose of power of attorney, that's abuse of fiduciary duty. And the fact that she's locked you out of your own home, that's illegal eviction. She may own the property on paper, but you have tenant rights. She can't just throw you out without proper legal eviction proceedings." I felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. "So there's something we can do?" David's expression was determined. "Mrs. Sullivan, there's a lot we can do. We're going to file for an emergency protective order, petition to have the power of attorney revoked based on abuse, and file a civil suit for financial elder abuse and fraud. We'll also be reporting this to Adult Protective Services. If we can prove your daughter obtained these assets through false pretenses and is willfully neglecting your care, we can get these transfers reversed." Over the next 2 weeks, David worked like a man on a mission. He filed emergency motions with the court. He contacted Adult Protective Services, who opened an investigation. He subpoenaed bank records showing exactly where my money had gone, and what he found was damning. Victoria had transferred $2 million to her personal checking account within days of the documents being finalized. She'd spent $400,000 on a down payment for a vacation property in Aspen. She'd purchased a $150,000 car. She'd transferred another million to investment accounts in her name only. In less than a month, she'd spent or moved over $3 million for her personal benefit while giving me subsistence-level support. The court granted an emergency hearing. Victoria was ordered to appear before a judge to show cause why the power of attorney shouldn't be revoked and why she shouldn't be held in contempt for illegal eviction. I'll never forget walking into that courtroom. Victoria sat at a table with her own lawyer, looking confident and polished in an expensive navy suit. When she saw me walk in with David and Helen, her expression flickered, just for a second, with something that might have been worry, but she quickly composed herself into a mask of concerned daughter dealing with a difficult, confused mother. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Judge Patricia Morrison. She reviewed the filings, then looked at Victoria. "Ms. Ashford, you're here because your mother has alleged financial elder abuse and illegal eviction. You obtained power of attorney and full transfer of her assets, totaling approximately $33 million, and subsequently locked her out of her home with minimal personal belongings. What's your response?" Victoria's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client acted entirely within her legal rights. Mrs. Sullivan voluntarily signed all documents transferring assets. Ms. Ashford has been managing these assets responsibly. The property in question is legally owned by Ms. Ashford. Any disagreements are family matters, not legal issues." Judge Morrison turned to me. "Mrs. Sullivan, can you tell me what you were promised when you signed these documents?" I stood on shaking legs. "Your Honor, my daughter told me this. Was estate planning to protect me from taxes and future nursing home costs. She promised that nothing would change except paperwork. She promised I would always have my home and full access to my money. She said she was just managing things legally to help me. Within weeks of signing, she closed all my accounts, gave me a tiny allowance, isolated me from my grandchildren, canceled my insurance, and eventually locked me out of my home with a garbage bag of belongings. She spent millions on herself while telling me she couldn't afford to give me enough money for basic groceries." Judge Morrison's expression grew steely. She looked at Victoria. "Ms. Ashford, did you promise your mother she would remain in the home?" Victoria hesitated. Her lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, my client's recollection may differ." Judge Morrison held up her hand. "I'm asking Ms. Ashford directly. Did you or did you not promise your mother she could remain in the home?" Victoria's voice was tight. "I may have said something to that effect, but circumstances changed. The property needed proper management." Judge Morrison looked at the bank records David had submitted. "I see here that you spent $400,000 on a vacation property for yourself within 2 weeks of obtaining these assets. You purchased a $150,000 vehicle. You transferred millions to your personal accounts. How does any of that constitute managing your mother's assets for her benefit?" Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "I was investing the money wisely, making it grow. My mother doesn't understand finance. She would have let it sit earning nothing." The judge's voice was ice. "Ms. Ashford, the purpose of power of attorney is to act in your mother's best interest, not your own. You've enriched yourself while providing your mother inadequate support. That's not investment management, that's theft." She turned to Victoria's lawyer. "I'm issuing an immediate order freezing all assets that originated from Mrs. Sullivan. Ms. Ashford, you are not to spend, transfer, or access any remaining funds from your mother's original accounts. I'm also ordering you to provide Mrs. Sullivan immediate access back to her home, with locks changed back at your expense. I'm scheduling a full hearing in 30 days to determine whether these asset transfers should be reversed entirely." Mrs. Sullivan, you'll be appointed a temporary guardian ad litem to ensure your interests are protected while this is sorted out. Court adjourned. The gavel came down. Victoria stared at the judge in shock. Her lawyer tried to speak, but Judge Morrison had already left the bench. As we walked out of the courtroom, Victoria caught up to me in the hallway. Her face was twisted with rage. "You've ruined everything," she hissed. "Do you know how much this is going to cost me in legal fees? How embarrassing this is. Everyone in my social circle will know. You're supposed to be my mother. How could you do this to me?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't my daughter speaking. This was a stranger who wore my daughter's face. The real Victoria, the little girl I'd loved, was gone. Maybe she'd never existed the way I remembered. "How could I do this to you?" I said quietly. "Victoria, I gave you everything. My money, my home, my trust. And you threw me away like garbage. The question isn't how I could do this to you. It's how you could do this to me." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For just a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe shame, maybe regret. But it was gone in an instant. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the courthouse floor. I watched her go and felt nothing but relief that the truth was finally coming out. The next few days moved quickly. Victoria changed the locks back on my house, though she did it with such obvious resentment that the locksmith told Helen he'd never seen someone so angry about following a court order. Adult Protective Services conducted their investigation, interviewing me, Helen, Emma, and even Victoria's husband, Marcus. What they found was damning. Marcus confirmed that Victoria had been spending extravagantly, that he'd raised concerns about her treatment of me, and that she'd dismissed him. Emma gave a tearful statement about her mother forbidding contact with me and lying about my mental state. The full hearing came 4 weeks later. David had built an ironclad case. He had my testimony. He had Helen as a witness to the rapid decline in my circumstances. He had the locksmith's statement confirming he'd changed locks on Victoria's instructions, noting that I'd been present and upset. He had the property inspector's records showing Victoria had initiated management services without my knowledge. He had Emma's statement. He had bank records showing Victoria's spending spree. He had text messages where Victoria denied me basic necessities while spending lavishly on herself. Victoria's lawyer tried to argue that I was mentally incompetent and needed Victoria's management. David destroyed that argument by having me evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist who confirmed I was fully competent, had no signs of dementia or confusion, and was able to manage my own affairs. The psychiatrist's report specifically noted that my distress was a rational response to financial exploitation and betrayal by a family member, not evidence of cognitive impairment. Judge Morrison took less than an hour to reach her decision. She revoked all powers of attorney Victoria held over me. She ordered the immediate reversal of all asset transfers, returning full ownership of my money and property to me. She ordered Victoria to pay restitution for the funds she'd already spent from my accounts, approximately $3.2 million. She issued a protective order prohibiting Victoria from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home. And she referred the case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. I watched Victoria's face as the judge read the decision. She went pale, then red, her hands clenching into fists. Her lawyer whispered urgently to her, probably telling her not to speak. When it was over, I walked out of that courtroom with David and Helen on either side of me. I had my home back. I had my money back. I had my life back. But the consequences for Victoria were only beginning. Word spread quickly through her social circle, the kind of wealthy, status-conscious community where reputation is everything. People learned that Victoria Sullivan Ashford had been found guilty of financially exploiting her elderly mother. The charity board she sat on quietly asked her to resign. Her tennis club friends stopped calling. Her daughter Emma, disgusted by her mother's actions, chose to spend more time with me, eventually moving in with me during her senior year of high school with Marcus's full support. Marcus, to his credit, was appalled by what Victoria had done. He filed for separation 2 months after the hearing, citing irreconcilable differences and Victoria's actions as demonstrating fundamental character flaws I can no longer overlook. Victoria's world collapsed, the same way she'd tried to collapse mine. She went from wealthy socialite with a perfect life to social pariah facing restitution payments she couldn't afford. The vacation property in Aspen had to be sold at a loss to help pay what she owed me. The expensive car was repossessed when she couldn't make payments. She moved from her mansion to a modest apartment. The life she'd stolen from me to finance her luxury crumbled under the weight of her own greed. I wish I could say I felt happy about her downfall. But mostly I felt sad. Sad for the relationship we'd lost. Sad that greed had destroyed whatever love might have existed between us. Sad that Emma and Joshua had to watch their mother face the consequences of her cruelty. But I didn't regret fighting back. Some people might say I should have just let it go. That family is more important than money. But this wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about refusing to be erased, about standing up and saying I matter, even when the person who should have loved me most was trying to tell me I didn't. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories of strength and redemption. Have you ever experienced family betrayal or seen an elder mistreated? Share your thoughts in the comments. Today, 2 years after that horrible day in the grocery store parking lot, I sit in my home, truly my home again, and feel at peace. Helen still comes over for coffee every Tuesday. Emma visits regularly and calls me almost every day. Joshua, now 16, has started coming by on weekends to help with yard work and just talk. He told me recently that watching what happened made him realize what kind of person his mother had become and what kind of person he didn't want to be. I've reconnected with old friends from my teaching days. I've started volunteering at a legal aid clinic that helps elderly victims of financial abuse, sharing my story to help others recognize the warning signs. I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. That age doesn't mean you have to accept mistreatment. That fighting back isn't cruel, sometimes it's survival. Victoria and I have no relationship now. The protective order expired, but we maintain distance. She sent one email about 8 months ago, a short message saying she was sorry things turned out this way, and hoping we could move past this eventually. It wasn't an apology for what she'd done. It was regret that she'd faced consequences. I didn't respond. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt, and that's okay. I've learned that you can love the memory of someone while accepting that the person they've become is a stranger. Looking back now, I understand that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we loved most deeply. The betrayal cuts so deeply precisely because of looking back now. I understand that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we loved most deeply. The betrayal cut so deeply precisely because of the trust that existed before. I'd trusted Victoria with everything, my money, my home, my future, because she was my daughter. I'd raised her. I'd taught her right from wrong, or at least I thought I had. Somewhere along the way, greed and entitlement replaced the values Robert and I tried to instill. Maybe we gave her too much. Maybe we shielded her from consequences. Maybe the seeds of who she became were always there, and I just didn't want to see them. I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't about revenge. It's about refusing to disappear, So many elderly people suffer in silence because they're embarrassed, or they don't want to cause family trouble, or they believe they somehow deserve the mistreatment. I almost became one of those statistics, one of the millions of seniors who lose everything to financial exploitation and never fight back. But Helen's voice in my ear, telling me this wasn't right, gave me the courage to speak up. And speaking up saved my life. The money was important, yes. It represented security, independence, and Robert's legacy. But more than that, fighting back was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about looking in the mirror and seeing someone strong enough to stand up to her own daughter when that daughter was wrong. It was about teaching my grandchildren, especially Emma, that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting abuse. Real love involves boundaries, respect, and honesty. What Victoria did wasn't love. It was exploitation dressed up in the language of family obligation. I think about other elderly people in my situation who don't have a Helen to open their eyes, who don't have an Emma brave enough to tell the truth, who don't have access to lawyers like David Chen who fight for justice. That's why I volunteer now at the Legal Aid Clinic. I share my story not because I'm proud of what happened, but because I know that somewhere there's another grandmother being told she's too old to manage her own affairs. There's another elderly parent signing papers they don't understand because a child is pressuring them. There's another senior being isolated, controlled, and erased. If my story helps even one person recognize the warning signs and fight back before it's too late, then maybe some good came from this nightmare. Victoria has tried to rebuild her life. I hear things through mutual acquaintances. She works now, actually works, something she rarely did before. She's in a smaller home, drives a practical car, lives within her means. Marcus remarried 2 years ago, and from what Emma tells me, he's happy. Joshua visits Victoria occasionally, though their relationship is strained. He's a good boy with a strong moral compass, and watching his mother's downfall taught him lessons about character that no parent could teach directly. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if Victoria ever really understands what she did. If she lies awake thinking about the day she handed me a garbage bag and told me to leave my own home. If she feels genuine remorse or just regret that she got caught, I'll probably never know. We exist in separate worlds now, connected only by the biological fact of mother and daughter, but strangers in every way that matters. But I've made peace with that. I've learned that you can grieve the relationship you thought you had while accepting the reality of what it actually was. I've learned that some people are capable of loving their own comfort more than they love their family. I've learned that my worth isn't determined by whether my daughter values me, but by how I value myself. My life now is quieter than it was before all this happened, but it's richer in the ways that matter. I have friends who genuinely care. I have Emma, who visits weekly and calls almost daily, bringing her college friends over to meet the coolest grandma ever. I have Joshua, who's learning from his mother's mistakes. I have my home, filled with memories of Robert and the life we built together. I have my independence, hard-won and precious, and I have the knowledge that when I was tested, when everything was taken from me, I didn't break. I fought back. I survived. I won. There's a particular kind of strength that comes from rebuilding your life at 68 years old. It's not the strength of youth, all energy and invincibility. It's quieter, steadier. It's the strength of someone who's lost everything and discovered that everything can be rebuilt. It's the strength of knowing that age doesn't make you powerless. It makes you experienced. And experience, properly applied, is the most powerful weapon against those who underestimate you. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories of strength and redemption. Have you ever experienced family betrayal or seen an elder mistreated? Have you had to stand up to someone you love because staying silent would have destroyed you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their courage. I still live in my house on the quiet street where Robert and I raised Victoria all those years ago. I still tend my rose garden. I still have coffee with Helen every Tuesday morning. But now, I also lock my documents in a safe. I review my bank statements carefully. I've set up safeguards to protect myself from future exploitation. And I've made a new will, one that reflects the reality of my family rather than the fantasy I used to believe in. Emma will inherit everything. She's earned it through loyalty, love, and courage. If I could go back and talk to the version of myself who sat at that dining room table signing away everything, I would tell her to stop. To call a lawyer first. To never, ever sign papers under pressure, no matter who's asking. To understand that promises mean nothing without legal protections. But I can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward with the wisdom we've gained. Scarred but stronger, sadder but wiser. Looking back, I can finally see the signs I missed. The way Victoria always seemed resentful of my simple lifestyle. The comments about wasting money by not spending it. The increasing impatience whenever I asked questions. The way she talked about me to others, subtly undermining my competence. The isolation that happened so gradually, I didn't notice until I was completely alone. If I'd been paying attention, I might have seen the storm coming. But hindsight is cruel that way, perfectly clear only when it's too late to matter. But here's what I want you to take from my story. It's never too late to fight back. Whether you're 68 like I was, or 78 or 88, your life matters. Your dignity matters. You don't have to accept mistreatment just because someone is family. You don't have to disappear quietly to avoid causing problems. You have the right to stand up, speak out, and demand justice. And there are people, lawyers like David, friends like Helen, organizations that fight elder abuse, who will help you. You are not alone. You are not powerless. And you are never too old to reclaim your life. Have you ever had to choose between family peace and your own dignity? Have you ever looked at someone you love and realized they've become a stranger? Have you ever found strength you didn't know you had in the darkest moment of your life? Think about that, and remember, your story isn't over until you decide it is. The stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. We believe in honoring our elders and treating all family members with love and respect. These stories are meant to inspire reflection on family relationships and the importance of compassion. Any resemblance to real people, events, or families is purely coincidental and unintentional. These narratives carry no specific cultural, political, or religious implications.